Most people think destiny arrives with noise. Mine arrived with muddy paws and a lost dog. It was a cold October evening in Manhattan. Rain fell steadily from a sky the color of wet concrete. The sidewalks glistened beneath streetlights, and thousands of people hurried home without looking at one another. That was normal in New York. Everyone was chasing something. A train. A meeting. A deadline. A life that always seemed one step ahead. I was no different. My name is Chloe Bennett, and at 28 years old, I spent most of my days trying to stay ahead of bills, responsibilities, and worries that never seemed to disappear. That evening had already been long. My shift at the bookstore ended late. My feet hurt. My coat was soaked from the rain. All I wanted was to get home, heat a bowl of soup, and forget about the world for a few hours. Then I heard a sound. It was faint at first, barely noticeable beneath the traffic and rainfall. A whimper. I stopped walking. The people around me did not. They kept moving, umbrellas tilted against the weather. The sound came again. I followed it toward a narrow alley between two buildings. At the far end, partially hidden behind a dumpster, stood a golden retriever. Its fur was soaked. Its paws trembled against the cold pavement. The dog looked frightened and exhausted. For a moment our eyes met. I do not know why, but something about that look made my chest tighten. Maybe it was because the animal looked completely alone. Maybe it was because nobody else seemed willing to stop. Whatever the reason, I found myself stepping into the alley. "Hey there," I said softly. The dog backed away at first. Cautious. Nervous. I crouched down despite the rain soaking through my jeans. "It is okay." The dog studied me for several seconds before taking a hesitant step forward. Then another. Eventually it allowed me to scratch behind its ears. Its tail moved slightly. Not much. Just enough. I smiled. Around its neck was an expensive leather collar. Whoever owned this dog cared about it. Attached to the collar was a small metal tag. My heart lifted when I saw it. There was a phone number. Unfortunately, the rain had partially smeared the engraving. Several digits remained visible. Others did not. "Of course," I muttered. Nothing could ever be easy. I looked around. No one appeared to be searching nearby. No missing dog posters. No frantic owner running through the streets. The dog pressed closer against me as another gust of wind swept through the alley. I sighed. "Well, I guess you are coming with me." The dog wagged its tail for the first time. Somehow that felt like agreement. 20 minutes later, we sat inside my tiny apartment. A towel covered the floor. The dog happily occupied most of it. I watched as it devoured a bowl of food with remarkable enthusiasm. Water dripped from its fur onto the hardwood. My apartment suddenly smelled like wet dog. Yet for the first time all day I found myself smiling. The dog finished eating and rested its head against my knee. Outside, rain continued tapping against the windows. I reached down and gently scratched behind its ears. "Tomorrow," I promised, "we will figure out where you belong." The dog closed its eyes, trusting me completely. I had no idea that finding its owner would pull me into a world I never imagined. All I knew was that one small decision on a rainy Manhattan sidewalk had already begun changing my life. The next morning I woke up to the sound of claws clicking across hardwood floors. For a moment I forgot the dog was there. Then I opened my eyes and found a golden retriever sitting beside my bed, staring at me with remarkable patience. The dog wagged its tail exactly once. Apparently breakfast was overdue. I laughed despite myself. It had been a long time since anything in my apartment had made me smile before 8 in the morning. An hour later we were sitting at my tiny kitchen table. While I was sitting, the dog was lying on the floor beside me, watching every movement I made as if I possessed the secrets of the universe. I examined the collar again. The leather was expensive, high quality, definitely not something purchased at a discount store. The metal tag still displayed part of a phone number, but several digits remained impossible to read. I tried searching online using the visible numbers. Nothing. I called local veterinary clinics. Nothing. Animal shelters. Nothing. By noon, frustration was beginning to replace optimism. Whoever owned this dog had to be worried. Yet every lead seemed to disappear before it went anywhere. During my lunch break, I took the dog to a pet supply store hoping someone might recognize it. Several employees admired the animal. One customer even offered to adopt it if nobody claimed it. The dog responded by sitting firmly beside my leg and refusing to move. "I think that means no," I told the customer. The woman laughed. So did I. Yet underneath the humor, I felt a growing responsibility. The dog trusted me now. That mattered more than it should have. Later that afternoon, a small breakthrough finally arrived. While cleaning mud from the collar, I noticed something hidden beneath the leather strap. Tiny embossed letters. Almost invisible. A name. Muksh. Beneath it was part of an address. Not complete, but enough to narrow the search. My pulse quickened. For the first time I felt like I was getting somewhere. After work, I boarded the subway with Max resting at my feet. The train rattled beneath the city while commuters stared at their phones and ignored one another. Several passengers smiled at the dog. Max accepted the attention graciously. It seemed impossible for anyone not to like him. By evening, we reached one of Manhattan's wealthiest neighborhoods. The partial address on the collar pointed somewhere nearby. Tall buildings rose above spotless sidewalks. Luxury vehicles lined the streets. Everything looked polished. Expensive. Completely different from my corner of the city. I checked the collar again. Then a street sign. Then the collar. Then another street sign. Eventually, I found myself standing outside a massive gated property hidden behind iron fencing and stone walls. The place looked more like a private estate than a residence. Security cameras overlooked the entrance. Elegant landscaping surrounded the building. Max immediately stood up straighter. His ears perked. His tail began moving rapidly. "Do you recognize this place?" I asked. The answer was obvious. Max was already pulling gently toward the gate. Before I could decide what to do next, one of the security doors opened. A man in a dark suit stepped outside. His expression was serious until he noticed the dog. Then everything changed. Relief flashed across his face. Genuine relief. He spoke quietly into an earpiece before looking back at me. "Where did you find him?" he asked. I glanced down at Max, then back toward the enormous building beyond the gate. Something told me I had just stumbled into a story much bigger than a lost dog. Some people reveal who they are by what they own. Others reveal who they are by what they love. I stood outside the iron gate while Max wagged his tail so hard that his entire body seemed to move with it. The security guard opened the gate and motioned for me to follow. For a brief moment I considered turning around. My job was finished. The dog was safe. I could go home and return to my ordinary life. Yet curiosity kept my feet moving forward. Max certainly had no intention of leaving. He trotted ahead across a stone pathway lined with perfectly trimmed hedges and carefully maintained gardens. The property looked less like a home and more like something from a movie. Warm lights glowed through enormous windows. Luxury cars rested beneath a covered driveway. Everything about the place suggested money. The kind of money most people only see in magazines. When we reached the front entrance, the massive wooden doors opened before anyone touched them. Several staff members appeared immediately. The moment they saw Max, relief spread across their faces. One woman actually placed a hand over her heart. Another smiled as if a missing family member had returned. That surprised me. I expected concern. I did not expect affection. Max greeted everyone enthusiastically before suddenly stopping. His ears lifted. His tail moved even faster. Then he sprinted across the marble floor toward the far end of the entrance hall. I turned and saw a man descending a wide staircase. He looked about 40. Tall. Dark hair. Perfectly tailored black suit. Calm posture. The kind of presence that made people pay attention without him asking for it. Max reached him in seconds. The dog practically launched itself forward. The man's serious expression disappeared instantly. He knelt and wrapped both arms around the animal. For several moments, nothing else seemed to exist. Not the staff. Not the house. Not me. Just a man and a dog who were genuinely happy to see each other again. When he finally stood, his hand remained resting on Max's head. Then his eyes shifted toward me. "You found him." His voice was calm, controlled, yet I could hear gratitude beneath it. "I did." He crossed the room and extended his hand. Dominic Moretti. I shook it. Chloe Bennett. His grip was firm but respectful. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then Dominic glanced toward Max. You have no idea how much this means. I smiled. He made it pretty clear where he wanted to go. That earned the smallest hint of a laugh. The expression transformed his face. It made him seem less intimidating, more human. A few minutes later, one of the staff members arrived carrying an envelope. Dominic accepted it and offered it to me. I already knew what it was. A reward. The envelope looked thick enough to solve several problems in my life. Rent, bills, groceries, maybe more. I stared at it for a second longer than I should have. Then I gently pushed it back toward him. No. Dominic blinked. No. I did not help Max for money. Genuine surprise crossed his face. Not skepticism. Surprise. As if people rarely said those words to him. Please, he said. You earned it. I shook my head. The dog is home. That is enough. Silence filled the room. Dominic studied me carefully. The staff members seemed equally confused. Finally, I smiled and reached down to scratch behind Max's ears one last time. Take care of him. Then I turned toward the door. As I walked away, I could feel Dominic watching. I did not know why. I only knew that when the cold night air greeted me outside, something told me this would not be the last time our paths crossed. The people who leave the deepest impression are often the ones who never try to be remembered. For the next few days, life returned to normal. At least that was what I told myself. I went to work at the bookstore. I stocked shelves, helped customers find novels they would probably never finish, counted the minutes until my lunch break. The same routine, the same apartment, the same worries waiting for me at the end of every month. Yet every now and then, my thoughts drifted back to the enormous estate and the man standing in the marble entrance hall. Not because of his wealth, not because of the house, because of the way his expression changed when he saw Max. There had been something genuine in that moment, something impossible to fake. A week later, I was carrying a box of newly delivered books toward the front display when my manager appeared beside me. Chloe, there is someone asking for you. I frowned. Nobody ever came looking for me at work. Setting the box down, I followed him toward the front of the store. The moment I stepped into view, I stopped. Max sat proudly near the entrance. His tail immediately began wagging. Beside him stood Dominic Moretti. Customers moved around them without realizing how unusual the scene was. Dominic looked completely at ease despite attracting curious glances from half the store. Max, meanwhile, seemed delighted with himself. You brought a dog into a bookstore? I asked. A faint smile appeared on Dominic's face. Technically, the dog brought me. I laughed before I could stop myself. Somehow that answer felt believable. Max walked over and nudged my hand with his nose. I thought you two might like to see each other again, Dominic said. I knelt to scratch behind Max's ears. The dog leaned happily against my shoulder. You could have just sent a picture. He disagreed. Another smile. Another brief glimpse of the man hidden beneath the expensive suit. We talked for a few minutes. Simple conversation. Books, dogs, weather, ordinary things. Yet nothing about the interaction felt ordinary. Dominic listened carefully whenever I spoke. Most people listened because they were waiting for their turn to talk. He actually paid attention. Eventually a customer approached me for help finding a novel. When I returned several minutes later, Dominic was examining one of the bookstore displays. You read? I asked. Sometimes. That is not a very convincing answer. I am selective. I raised an eyebrow. Meaning I prefer stories about people who earn what they have. The response caught me off guard. Something about the way he said it felt personal. Before I could ask what he meant, Max wandered toward a shelf and nearly knocked over an entire stack of books. I rushed to stop the collapse. Dominic helped. For several seconds, both of us were balancing novels while Max sat nearby looking completely innocent. We laughed at the same time. The sound surprised me. Not because it happened, because it felt natural. Later that afternoon, Dominic prepared to leave. Max clearly wanted to stay. Traitor, Dominic told the dog. Max wagged his tail. I smiled. Then Dominic looked at me. Would you allow me to thank you properly? I already knew where the conversation was going. No reward money. Not money. Then what? For the first time he seemed uncertain. Just slightly. Dinner. The word hung between us. Not a business arrangement. Not an obligation. Simply dinner. I opened my mouth to answer, then closed it again. Outside, sunlight streamed through the bookstore windows. Customers moved quietly through the aisles. Max sat between us, completely unaware that something important had just shifted. Because sometimes the beginning of a story does not announce itself. Sometimes it simply asks a question and waits for an answer. The hardest seasons of life rarely announce themselves. They simply arrive one problem at a time until you realize you can barely breathe beneath the weight of them. I did not answer Dominic's invitation immediately. Part of me wanted to say yes. Another part reminded me that men like him and women like me usually lived in different worlds. For several days, I convinced myself that avoiding the question was easier than answering it. Then life made the decision seem unimportant. It started on a Thursday morning. My manager called me into his office before the store opened. The conversation lasted less than 10 minutes. Sales were down. Budgets were shrinking. Hours were being cut. Several positions were being eliminated. Mine happened to be one of them. I walked out carrying a small cardboard box containing a coffee mug, a framed photograph of my parents, and a few personal items from my locker. Outside, Manhattan looked exactly the same as it had the day before. Taxis filled the streets. People rushed toward offices. Construction crews worked beneath towering buildings. Yet everything felt different. I had just lost my primary source of income. The timing could not have been worse. Rent was due in 2 weeks. My savings account was already thin. I spent the afternoon sending applications everywhere I could think of. Bookstores, offices, reception positions, administrative jobs, anything. By evening, my inbox remained empty. The following morning brought another problem. My younger brother Ethan called before sunrise. The moment I heard his voice, I knew something was wrong. I am sorry, he said quietly. What happened? There was a long pause. Then he explained that a necessary medical expense had increased unexpectedly. The amount was not impossible, but combined with everything else, it felt overwhelming. After the call ended, I sat alone at my kitchen table staring at unpaid bills. The apartment felt smaller than usual. The silence felt heavier. For the first time in years, I allowed myself a few minutes of frustration. Not anger. Not self-pity. Just exhaustion. I had spent so much time helping everyone around me that sometimes I forgot how tired I was becoming. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. I opened the door expecting a delivery. Instead, I found Max sitting in the hallway. Behind him stood Dominic. The sight caught me completely off guard. How did he find my apartment? I asked. Dominic glanced at the dog. I suspect he remembers better than either of us. Max walked inside as if he owned the place. Within seconds, he had settled beside the couch. Dominic remained near the doorway. His expression shifted the moment he looked at me. Something happened. It was not a question. I tried smiling. The attempt failed. You are very observant. Chloe. The way he said my name made it difficult to continue pretending everything was fine. I looked away. Out the window. Toward the city. Anywhere except at him. Finally, I told him the truth. The job. The bills. Ethan. Every problem that seemed determined to arrive at the same time. Dominic listened without interrupting. When I finished, silence filled the room. Then he nodded slowly. You are carrying a lot. I laughed softly. That is one way to describe it. Max rested his head against my knee. Dominic watched the scene carefully. There was concern in his eyes now. Real concern. The kind that could not be purchased or performed. As evening sunlight faded across the apartment walls, I did not know it yet, but somewhere behind that calm expression, Dominic Moretti had already decided he was not going to stand by and watch me face the storm alone. Hope rarely arrives all at once. Sometimes it appears as a series of small doors opening where there used to be walls. A few days after Dominic visited my apartment, I woke up expecting another difficult morning. Instead, I found an email waiting in my inbox. The subject line immediately caught my attention. A publishing company in Manhattan wanted to schedule an interview. I stared at the screen for several seconds, convinced I had misunderstood something. I had submitted dozens of applications. Most received no response at all. Yet this company wanted to meet with me. By noon, I was sitting in a bright conference room overlooking the city. The interview felt surprisingly natural. The hiring manager seemed genuinely interested in my experience. We talked about books, customer service, community outreach, and education programs. When I left the building, I felt something unfamiliar. Optimism. 2 days later, another unexpected development arrived. One of Ethan's medical coordinators called with news about a newly available assistance program that could significantly reduce some of his expenses. The coordinator explained that additional funding had recently become available. The timing seemed almost impossible. After hanging up, Ethan sounded happier than I had heard him in months. Maybe things are finally turning around, he said. I wanted to believe him. I really did. Yet a small part of me remained cautious. Life had a habit of giving with one hand and taking with the other. A week later, the publishing company offered me the position. The salary was better than my bookstore job. The benefits were stronger. The growth opportunities were significantly better. I sat alone in my apartment reading the offer letter 3 times before accepting that it was real. That evening there was another knock at my door. I opened it and immediately smiled. Max walked inside before I could say a word. Dominic followed a few seconds later. He has decided this is his second home, Dominic said. I think he likes my snacks. I think he likes you. Max settled onto the rug as if proving the point. Dominic noticed the offer letter still sitting on my table. Good news, he asked. I nodded. I got the job. Genuine happiness appeared on his face. Not polite happiness. Real happiness. The kind people feel when something good happens to someone they care about. Congratulations, Chloe. Hearing those words affected me more than I expected. Perhaps because I had worked so hard to reach this moment. Perhaps because Dominic sounded proud of me. We spent the next hour talking. About work. About Ethan. About books. About life. The conversation flowed effortlessly. Yet as the evening continued, a strange thought kept returning to me. Too many things had improved at the same time. The interview. Ethan's assistance program. Several other small opportunities that had appeared recently. Individually, none of them seemed suspicious. Together, they felt unusually fortunate. At one point, Dominic stepped onto the balcony to take a phone call. Through the glass door, I watched him speaking quietly while city lights stretched endlessly beyond him. Confident. Composed. Powerful. A man accustomed to making things happen. The thought lingered after he returned inside. Pushed it away. Then it returned again. Later, after Dominic and Max left, I stood by the window looking down at the street below. New York shimmered beneath thousands of lights. Somewhere out there, people were struggling. Winning. Losing. Beginning new chapters. Ending old ones. My own life seemed to be changing faster than ever before. For the first time in weeks, I felt hopeful about the future. Yet beneath that hope, another feeling quietly began to grow. Curiosity. Because the more I looked at the pieces falling into place around me, the more I wondered whether luck alone was responsible. And for the first time, I found myself asking a question I had never considered before. How many of these miracles had truly happened by chance? The truth has a strange habit of leaving clues behind long before anyone notices them. My new job began on a bright Monday morning. The office overlooked Midtown Manhattan, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was moving toward something instead of merely surviving. The work was challenging. The people were kind. Every day brought opportunities to learn something new. From the outside, everything seemed perfect. Yet the question that had entered my mind weeks earlier refused to disappear. Why had so many things improved at exactly the same time? I tried to ignore it. Focus on work. Focus on Ethan. Focus on the future. But small details kept pulling my attention back. One afternoon, I attended a company networking event. Most of the conversations blurred together until I found myself speaking with a senior executive from another department. We talked about publishing trends, community programs, and nonprofit partnerships. Then he casually mentioned something that made my stomach tighten. Your name sounds familiar, he said. I think someone specifically recommended your application. I blinked. Recommended? Yes. Not officially, of course. But I remember hearing positive things before your interview. He smiled and took another sip of coffee. Whoever it was had excellent judgment. The conversation moved on. Mine did not. For the rest of the day, those words echoed in my mind. Recommended. Positive things. Before the interview. That evening I called Ethan. Can I ask you something? Sure. Has anything unusual happened lately? He laughed. Besides my sister suddenly becoming suspicious of good news? I am serious. Ethan hesitated. Actually, there was something. My pulse quickened. What? A few weeks ago, one of the program coordinators mentioned an anonymous donor helping expand assistance funding. He said quietly. Zavezli? That is what they said. After the call ended, I stared out my apartment window at the city lights below. The pieces were beginning to form a picture. Not a complete picture, but enough to make me uncomfortable. Several days later, another clue appeared. Dominic and I met for coffee on a Saturday afternoon. Max rested beneath the table while people moved around us carrying shopping bags and umbrellas. The conversation started normally. Books, work, weather. Then Dominic excused himself to take a phone call. His phone remained on the table for a few seconds after he stood. The screen lit up briefly. I was not trying to look. Yet one name caught my attention before the display went dark again. It was the same name as the executive who had interviewed me weeks earlier. My heart skipped. When Dominic returned, I studied him differently. Not as the man who owned Max. Not as the man who occasionally appeared in my life at surprising moments. As someone who might know far more about my recent good fortune than he had admitted. What? He asked. I had apparently been staring. Nothing. The answer sounded unconvincing even to me. Dominic tilted his head slightly. Chloe. There was concern in his voice now. Concern and caution. As if he sensed exactly where my thoughts were leading. I looked away first. Later that night, I sat alone in my apartment reviewing every conversation, every coincidence, every opportunity. One by one the pieces aligned. The job. Ethan's funding. Certain introductions. Certain doors opening at exactly the right moment. None of it proved anything. Yet all of it pointed toward the same possibility. A possibility I could no longer ignore. Outside, rain tapped softly against the glass. The city shimmered beneath thousands of lights. Somewhere out there, Dominic Moretti was living his life as usual. Yet for the first time since meeting him, I was no longer wondering whether he had changed my future. I was wondering how much of it he had changed. And more importantly, why. The truth becomes impossible to ignore the moment your heart already knows the answer. For nearly a week, I avoided confronting Dominic. Not because I was afraid of what I might discover, because I was afraid of being right. Every coincidence pointed in the same direction. Every unanswered question seemed to lead back to him. Yet I needed certainty before I asked for the truth. The opportunity arrived on a cool Friday evening. Dominic invited me to dinner at a quiet restaurant overlooking the Hudson River. The setting was beautiful. Soft lights reflected across the water. The city skyline glowed beneath the night sky. Under different circumstances, I might have enjoyed every second of it. Instead, I spent most of the evening studying the man sitting across from me. Dominic noticed immediately. He always noticed. You have been unusually quiet tonight, he said. I set down my glass. I have been thinking. A faint smile touched his face. That sounds dangerous. Normally I would have laughed. This time I did not. The smile disappeared. Dominic leaned back slightly, waiting, giving me space to speak. Finally I took a breath. How much did you do? The question hung between us. Around us, conversations continued. Glasses clinked softly. Waiters moved through the dining room. Yet everything beyond our table seemed distant. Dominic did not pretend to misunderstand. What do you mean? He asked quietly. The job. I held his gaze. Ethan's assistance program. The people I met. The opportunities. My voice remained calm. How much of that was really coincidence? For several seconds Dominic said nothing. Then he looked toward the river. The lights reflected in the water below. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than I expected. More than you think. My heart sank and lifted at the same time. So it was you. Dominic nodded once. There was no denial. No excuse. No attempt to avoid responsibility. Just honesty. Why? I asked. The question came out quieter than I intended. Dominic looked directly at me. Because of that night. I already knew which night he meant. The rain. The alley. Max, that cannot be the whole reason. No, he admitted. It was the beginning. He paused before continuing. Most people would have walked past. I remembered the cold pavement. The rain. The frightened dog. It was only a dog. No. Dominic shook his head. It was a choice. His eyes never left. Mine. You helped when nobody was watching. You expected nothing in return. Do you know how rare that is? I did not answer. Because suddenly I understood. This was never about Max alone. It was about what Max revealed. Dominic continued. When you returned him, you refused the reward. A faint smile appeared. Most people would not have. Maybe. Then I learned more about you. His expression softened. I saw how hard you worked. How much you sacrificed for Ethan. How often you helped other people while asking nothing for yourself. Emotion tightened in my chest. You should have told me. Probably. The honesty surprised me. Then why did you not? Dominic looked down briefly before meeting my eyes again. Because I did not want you to feel like you owed me anything. Silence settled between us. Not uncomfortable silence. Honest silence. The kind that appears when two people finally stop hiding. Outside the window, the river moved beneath the city lights. I never gave anyone something they did not deserve, Dominic said quietly. I only made sure people notice what was already there. For the first time since this conversation began, I believed him. Yet another realization arrived at the same moment. The story I thought was ending had only reached its most important chapter. Because now I knew the truth about the opportunities. What I still did not know was something far more important. What Dominic Moretti truly meant to me. Some people spend their entire lives searching for something valuable. Others discover it by accident and spend the rest of their lives protecting it. A year passed faster than I expected. Seasons changed. Winter surrendered to spring. Spring gave way to summer. Life continued moving forward one day at a time. My new career flourished beyond anything I imagined. Ethan's health improved steadily. The constant fear that once followed me everywhere gradually faded into something quieter. Something manageable. Yet the greatest change was not my job or my circumstances. It was the space Dominic had slowly created in my life. Not through grand gestures. Not through promises. Through consistency. Through showing up. Through proving again and again that the person I met behind those iron gates was the same person he remained when nobody was watching. On a warm Saturday afternoon in early summer, Dominic asked me to meet him at a familiar location. The moment I arrived, I smiled. The same street. The same neighborhood. The same block where everything had started. The city looked different beneath bright sunshine than it had during that rainy October night. Sidewalk cafes overflowed with people. Street musicians filled the air with music. Trees swayed gently in the breeze. Yet one thing remained exactly the same. Muksh. The golden retriever stood proudly beside Dominic, wagging his tail as if he personally organized the reunion. I should have known he would be here, I said. Dominic glanced at the dog. This was his idea. Of course it was. Max immediately trotted toward me and leaned against my side. Some habits never changed. Together we began walking through the neighborhood. Neither of us seemed in a hurry. We passed the bookstore where I used to work. The small coffee shop where I had spent countless mornings worrying about bills. The subway entrance I used almost every day. Pieces of an old life. Pieces that somehow led me here. Eventually we reached the alley where I had first found Max. I stopped walking. The space looked smaller than I remembered. Less dramatic. More ordinary. Yet standing there again stirred something inside me. Right here, I said quietly. Dominic nodded. Right here. For a moment none of us spoke. Traffic moved in the distance. A breeze carried the scent of summer through the city. Max sat between us, completely unaware of the significance of the location. Or perhaps he understood more than we realized. Do you ever think about what would have happened if I kept walking? I asked. Dominic looked at me. You would not have. You sound very certain. A faint smile appeared. Because that is not who you are. The answer settled somewhere deep inside my chest. Looking around, I realized how much had changed because of one small decision. A lost dog. A rainy night. A stranger who stopped instead of walking away. The chain of events seemed almost impossible when viewed from the other side of it. Dominic stepped closer. Not dramatically. Not suddenly. Just enough that I could feel his presence beside me. You changed more lives than you know, he said. I shook my head. So did you. For several seconds, neither of us argued. Because both statements were true. Max barked softly, breaking the silence. We laughed at the same time. The sound echoed briefly through the alley before disappearing into the city beyond. As we turned and continued walking together beneath the afternoon sun, I finally understood something that had taken me a year to learn. Kindness is never as small as it seems. You never know where it will travel. You never know whose life it will touch. And sometimes, if you are very lucky, the thing you rescue ends up rescuing you right back.